Hey guys, tonight we're traveling far, far back, like 5,000 years back, to the ancient land of Sumer. You're standing in the sweltering heat of southern Mesopotamia, sweat collecting behind your ears as the afternoon sun bakes everything it touches. Before you, a towering ziggurat looms, its steps worn smooth by centuries of sandals. At the base of the structure, shaded beneath sun-bleached canopies, lies your destination, the temple library of Uar. You duck through a narrow doorway into a world of clay and silence. The scent hits you first, damp earth mixed with old incense, and just a hint of ancient mildew. Not unpleasant, really. Kind of comforting in that I'm probably going to be sweeping this place for weeks. Sort of way. You've just begun your apprenticeship here, assigned to assist the priest's scribes. Your tunic itches and clings to your back, but you try to stand tall, holding a chipped wooden board with fresh clay ready to be etched. You're about to become a very small cog in the world's first information bureaucracy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is. I love seeing how far these sleepy journeys reach. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your teacher today is a hunched, barefoot man who looks like he's spent his entire life arguing with broken tablets. He beckons you forward, muttering something about last week's intern misfiling the barley tithes under celestial omens. You decide it's best not to ask questions just yet. The room is not what you'd expect a library to look like. No towering shelves or cozy nooks. Instead, rows of clay cubbyholes sunken into mud brick walls, each holding dull, oblong tablets that look like they were made in a hurry. Because they were. Some are barely wider than your palm. Others look like they could break a foot if dropped. Most are unbaked, still soft, slightly squishy to the touch. You resist the urge to poke one. In the center, a flat table has been carved into the earth itself, ringed with clay stools. This is where texts are read, copied, corrected, and sometimes angrily thrown. Probably often angrily thrown. You're handed your first real task, assist in preparing the tablets for morning inventory. Mind the tags? Your supervisor mutters without explanation. You nod solemnly, as if that clears everything up. Turns out, tags are exactly what they sound like. Little lumps of clay with string holes at the top, used to label tablets. Before writing the full text, scribes would often make a tag describing what it was about, a kind of proto-title page. And yes, they were sometimes attached with twine, or more hilariously, just plopped next to the tablet and hoped not to get separated. Spoiler, they often did. The Temple Library, or EWA as it was called, which literally means House of the Tablets, wasn't just a cozy reading nook. It was a government archive, a law court's records department, and the receipts drawer of a civilization. It's where grain quotas were logged, court cases recorded, contracts sealed, hymns composed, and star charts meticulously drawn by candlelight. All in cuneiform, the earliest form of writing that looks like tiny birds walked across the clay while doing interpretive dance. And you, lucky you, have landed smack in the middle of it. Your job today is to help cross-check storage locations using the tags. Each cubby corresponds to a temple function: agriculture, taxation, astronomy, divination, you name it. The tags help prevent confusion, in theory. You pick up one tag. It reads roughly, barley deliveries to the moon priestess, year of the great flood. Another reads, list of goats, temple courtyard, north gate. You chuckle. List of goats could honestly be your autobiography at this point. Despite the heat and dust, there's a soothing rhythm to it all. The slow brushing of tablets clean with reeds, the quiet muttering of scribes counting out line marks, the occasional sigh when someone realizes their tag got swapped and now Gilgamesh's flood myth is listed under livestock trades. As the sun begins to lower and the shadows stretch across the clay walls, you can't help but admire the system's weird elegance. This isn't just an archive, it's the beating, slightly squishy heart of ancient bureaucracy. Each tag a whisper from the past, trying not to get lost in the dust. One of the senior scribes, a woman named Ninmala, walks by and notices your attention on the tag in your hand. She gives you a nod and says, "That one caused a huge debate last year. Some think it's mislabeled. It mentions barley but references a ritual." She shrugs. "Historians still argue whether it's economic record or ceremonial script. Doesn't matter. Still goes in agriculture." You smile, realizing even 5,000 years ago, there were filing debates and classification crises. Nothing changes. Except maybe the office chairs were comfier. By the end of the day, your hands are covered in reddish dust, your knees ache from kneeling, and you've memorized at least 10 ways to write the word goat. But there's a strange comfort in it. The weight of these ancient, handmade books, the cool touch of wet clay, the knowledge that you're part of a lineage of record keepers dating back to the very dawn of cities. Tomorrow, you'll learn more about the tablets themselves. But for now, the oil lamps flicker in their alcoves, and the night air slips in through the cracks. The scribes pack up their styluses, and you follow them out into the warm dark, the scent of burned myrrh trailing behind you like the day's last sigh. You wake up sore. Apparently, sleeping on a woven reed mat in a room full of snoring junior scribes isn't the most luxurious experience. But there's no time to groan. You're back in the tablet room by dawn, summoned by the squawk of a temple heron and the jangling chant of a street vendor selling lentil porridge. You shuffle into the archive, blinking against the early light filtering through high slits in the mud brick walls. Today's lesson comes with a challenge: understanding why Sumerians chose clay for writing in the first place. It seems obvious now. Clay was everywhere in southern Mesopotamia. Fields of sticky, brown earth just waiting to be scooped up and molded. But as you trudge behind your teacher, you realize there's more to it than abundance. Scrolls? Not a thing here. Papyrus, used by the Egyptians, didn't grow in this part of the world. Parchment would come centuries later. And forget about paper. It hadn't even been dreamed of. So instead, the Sumerians made do with their soggy soil. They developed styluses, usually carved reed tips, that pressed wedge-shaped impressions into flattened clay. Once inscribed, the tablets were either dried in the sun or baked in kilns for more permanence. Think of it like writing your journal entries into cookie dough, and then hardening them in an oven. Slightly stressful, deeply impractical, but oddly charming. Your supervisor gestures to the large stack you're meant to inventory. Each tablet is slightly different in texture and size. Some are light and crumbly, clearly dried in the sun, meant to be temporary. Others are dense and warm to the touch, their surfaces smoother, their texts meant to endure. You carefully lift one and read the first line. 3 donkeys delivered to the courtyard, with complaint. You can almost hear the ancient sigh behind that note. There's an unspoken rule among scribes: never drop a baked tablet on your toe. It's not just the weight, it's the shame. These things are awkward to carry, bulky, and covered in writing on both sides. There's no easy way to skim them either. If you want to find something, you better hope the person who made the tag actually knew what they were doing. Spoiler, they often didn't. As you fumble with one particularly clunky piece, a senior scribe named Lugal snorts from across the room. "First week?" he asks without looking up. You nod. He grins and holds up a massive, oval-shaped tablet covered in thousands of tiny wedges. "This one's a tax roll for barley," he says proudly. "Takes 20 minutes to read, longer if you want to stay awake." You marvel at the effort it must have taken to write something that detailed on clay. One slip of the stylus, one overly damp day, and poof, your entire record collapses into mush. And yet, here it is, still legible after thousands of years. You think about all the texts you've lost on your tablet, the digital kind, after one bad software update. Maybe the Sumerians were onto something. While copying a weather record, you notice a tiny paw print pressed into the margin. You hold it up to your mentor, who chuckles softly. "Ah yes, the sacred temple cat." Apparently, animals often wandered across soft tablets before they were dried. Some historians believe certain tablets were even intentionally stamped with symbolic prints, others are just accidents. There's an ongoing debate about whether a particular lion cub's paw on a flood tablet was sacred symbolism, or a lazy guard's pet gone rogue. As your hand cramps from pressing stylus into clay, you can't help but wonder, how did anyone find anything in this mess? Clay isn't the most portable material. You can't roll it, fold it, or stack it neatly. Instead, they built walls of cubbyholes and stacked tablets like bricks. One slip and your whole archive could become ancient Jenga. But the system worked, sort of. Especially with the tags. Some scribes even invented their own shorthand marks, a kind of proto-metadata. A triangle might indicate a royal decree, a fish symbol for food rations, a star for omens. It wasn't standardized, though, which means you, dear apprentice, get to play the thrilling game of guess that scribble, at least 12 times a day. You come across one particularly lopsided tag labeled, "Concerning the third goat." Intrigued, you match it with a small tablet nearby and begin to read. It appears to be a complaint lodged by a farmer about his third goat consistently escaping its pen and eating sacred barley offerings. The tablet ends with a stern note. "This must not happen again." You snort. Some things really don't change. Your instructor steps over and taps the corner of the tablet. "Notice the dot?" he says. "That's a copy marker." It turns out many scribes made duplicates, just in case the original cracked or got eaten by something. There are even known cases where copies slightly altered the original text, leading historians today to puzzle over which version was official. Some even theorize that these differences were intentional, ancient editorializing. Others believe they were simple mistakes caused by tired apprentices, much like yourself. You get a small thrill of power imagining yourself adding a mischievous line to a tax report, maybe a comment about the scribe's poor hygiene or a goat's superior intellect. Not that you'd ever actually do it, of course. But it's comforting to know that even the world's first paper pushers might have had a sense of humor. By mid-morning, your back aches, your stylus hand trembles, and you've developed a keen dislike for anything goat-related. Still, there's something deeply satisfying about it all. You're not just handling artifacts, you're reading the actual thoughts and transactions of people who lived, loved, argued, and misfiled things just like you. You rest your head briefly on the cool clay table. The world goes a little blurry, the sounds of scribes whispering and scratching styluses fading into a rhythmic lull. If only the tablets were slightly softer, you could probably nap on them. But no such luck. Your mentor rouses you with a sharp ahem and hands you a fresh stack of tablets. You've only just begun your initiation into the grand, chaotic, dusty tradition of Sumerian record-keeping. You're still rubbing a smudge of dried clay from your forehead when your next task arrives, literally tossed onto your table by a passing scribe. It's a bundle of string, roughly tied around a set of tablets and a small tag. "Recatalog those," the scribe mutters. "Last in turn mixed up the property deeds with goat sacrifice records." Of course they did. You lift the top tablet with both hands. It's hefty, like someone tried to compress an entire goat census into a single clay slab. Attached to the bundle is a thumb-sized tag, its hole still threaded with fraying palm fiber string. The text on the tag is short and crisp. List of ritual objects, temple quarter. Seems straightforward enough, until you flip through the stack and realize that one of the tablets appears to describe a wine shipment, and another includes a hymn to the moon goddess Nana. Welcome to the Sumerian filing system. Here in the heart of the temple library, tags are everything. These aren't just cue labels, they're the ancient answer to chaos. Before titles, indexes, or any concept of a table of contents, there were clay tags. Made from leftover bits of writing clay, usually about the size of a peach pit, they carried quick summaries of the full text. Some included dates. Others referenced people, gods, or storage areas. Most were pragmatic. A few deeply passive-aggressive. You hold up another tag that reads simply, "Don't misplace again." That's it. No author, no date, no subject. Just a warning, like a tiny baked threat. Tags were especially vital because once dried or baked, tablets became fragile, but they were still moved often, during audits, rituals, or temple renovations. So instead of chiseling an inscription directly onto each tablet, which took forever, scribes created these little companion pieces, kind of like luggage tags for your legal contracts. Some were tied directly onto tablets using palm fiber string looped through holes or slots made while the clay was still wet. Others were left loose, like mysterious little puzzle pieces scattered across the archive floor. You can already imagine the joy of playing the Sumerian version of which tag goes with this mud rectangle. One tablet you examine bears a cracked tag that reads, Wheat Deductions, Farmer Yarninger, Southfield. You turn over the corresponding tablet and read an account of wheat quotas, with precise deductions made for unusually lazy oxen, and ritual weather-related exemptions. You're not making this up. Ancient Mesopotamians had actual excuses for not meeting crop yields, and they were somehow weirder and more poetic than today's tax write-offs. The quirkiest part? Some tags weren't even used to summarize. They were commentary. An especially long tag might elaborate on why the tablet was written, or even add information that wasn't included in the original, kind of like a clay post-it note meets an op-ed column. There's one you find today that reads, See also, Big Storm Year. Vague, helpful, and entirely useless without context. You ask your instructor how the scribes kept track of all these loose tags. He shrugs. Memory. And judgment. And yelling. Sounds about right. Apparently, scribes often remembered where tablets were stored by association. Rituals went near other rituals. Agricultural records near food offerings. And when all else failed, someone would just shout across the archive until another scribe remembered where the barley tax rain complaint tablet went. Interestingly, not all tags were meant to last. Soft clay tags could be molded quickly, attached for temporary use, then removed and recycled once the document found its place. These ephemeral little labels were the sticky notes of their time, passed back and forth with no expectation of survival. And yet, against all odds, archaeologists have uncovered thousands, sometimes still tied to their original tablets, other times just scattered nearby like breadcrumbs from a bureaucratic picnic. One such tag lies cracked on your work table now. You gently press its two halves together. The inscription is simple but mysterious. 2 bulls, no priest. Your supervisor raises an eyebrow when you show it to him. Could be an incomplete sacrifice record, he says, or a complaint, or someone's idea of a joke. Historians still argue whether tags like that were formal records or just lazy note-taking. You set it aside and return to recataloguing the mismatched bundle. Turns out, one of the tablets doesn't match the tag at all. It isn't about ritual objects or property or wine. It's a recipe? You lean in, squinting at the cuneiform. Sure enough, it begins with 3 measures barley flour, 1 measure date syrup, followed by instructions that involve cooking in a stone-lined pit and serving on reeds. You're looking at an ancient Mesopotamian version of a kitchen tablet. The Sumerians, as you're learning, weren't particularly precious about separating genres. Tablets were organized based on use, not subject. So a prayer to the moon goddess might sit next to a recipe for sweet buns if both were recited during the same festival. In that light, maybe this recipe belonged in the ritual objects category, if it was used as part of a sacred meal. You're starting to understand why scholars today argue about everything. The lines between ritual, domestic life, and administration were blurry at best. Some tags help, others make things worse. Like the one you find that says simply, important, helpful. You think again about the effort that went into each tag. Someone had to mold the clay, press in each tiny wedge, poke a hole, thread it with fiber, and match it to the right tablet. And if that tablet got moved, the tag might be left behind, leading to centuries of confusion and possibly archaeologists shouting at the dirt. There's a kind of beautiful absurdity to the whole system. It relied on clay, string, memory, intuition, and an unspoken understanding among dozens of scribes, not to mention the goodwill of whoever was feeding the temple cats. And yet, somehow it worked. Or at least, it worked well enough for a few thousand years. Near the end of your shift, a junior scribe drops a bundle on your desk and says, Match these to their tags, or their spirits, whichever speaks to you first. You look down and sigh. More tablets. More tags. One of them reads, "Do not rebake, already baked." You chuckle and imagine a harried apprentice throwing a tablet back into the kiln out of panic. As the oil lamps are lit and the heat of the day fades from the mud brick walls, you sit back for a moment and take in the room. Rows of cubbies, stacks of tablets, the faint scratching of styluses still at work. Your hands are stained with ochre dust and clay, and your mind is spinning with barley ledgers, goat fines, and something about 2 bulls, no priest. The Sumerians didn't just invent writing. They invented the pain of filing, the anxiety of a misaligned tag, the eternal curse of mixed-up records. And strangely, you find it all deeply soothing. Like being wrapped in an ancient, bureaucratic blanket. You tuck one last tag next to its companion tablet and nod to yourself. The pairing may or may not be correct, but then again, historians still argue whether any of it ever truly matched. The sun creeps through the high windows again, and today, your feet find their way to the scribe pit before your brain fully catches up. A rooster crowing outside provides your soundtrack, though it sounds more like a cough than a call to glory. You stifle a yawn and slide onto the reed mat by your assigned station. It's time to observe a full day in the life of a temple scribe. Your mentor today is Eridanib, a surprisingly spry man with wrists like tree roots and a permanent clay smear on his cheek. He waves you over without looking up. He's already halfway through a list of incomplete donkey exchanges, a phrase you'll never be able to unhear. You sit quietly beside him, knees tucked under your scratchy tunic, trying not to knock over anything important. The scribe's table is a controlled chaos. Half-dried tablets, dull styluses, a carved wooden stamp with his name on it, a flask of water, and a tiny pouch of something that smells suspiciously like fermented dates. Breakfast, apparently. Eridanib doesn't greet you. He just speaks while working. You learn best by watching, or copying, or crying. Usually all 3. You nod solemnly and prepare to watch the magic unfold. His first task? Transcribing a royal decree about temple grain distribution. He murmurs the cuneiform words as he presses them into clay, each tiny wedge precise, like he's stabbing the earth with purpose. Grain to Enlil's temple, surplus to be stored by moonrise. The sentence is short, but writing it takes ages. No backspace, no autocorrect, no room for sloppy symbols. One smudged line and it might read, "Grain to Enlil's goat," which, depending on the priest, could start a holy crisis. The stylus, made from sharpened reed, requires control and rhythm. Downward presses make vertical wedges, angled strokes form slanted ones. Eridanib keeps his movements tight, disciplined. You try mimicking him on a spare scrap of clay. Yours looks like a confused bird walked across it after drinking too much of that fermented date mash. He notices and snorts. Better than your last attempt. I could almost read that word. Almost. As the morning progresses, he's pulled into a dozen different tasks. A priest storms in demanding a copy of the omens from last year's eclipse. A local merchant wants a duplicate of his barley loan contract. Another scribe asks if Eridanib still has the list of temple kitchen inventories or if it was eaten by the dog again. And somehow, through all this, he keeps writing. You notice the shift in his body language when he moves from mundane record-keeping to religious transcription. There's a reverence, a slowness, as he copies a hymn to Inanna. The wedges become more uniform, the spacing deliberate. This is not just paperwork, it's devotion in the form of dirt. Some say scribes were priests, he murmurs. Some say we were just better at spelling, he smirks. Historians still argue whether we were scholars or secretaries. He hands you a small practice tablet. Copy this list of temple animals. Neatly. You bend over the clay, tongue poking out in concentration, and begin. 2 goats. 1 ox. 1 goose. You pause. Why is the goose underlined? He raises an eyebrow. Because it bit the priest. Twice. Ah. Of course. A novice scribe runs by with a fresh batch of clay and a panicked expression. Apparently, someone has just accidentally filed a tax complaint under astral divinations. Again. You get the sense that accidents like this are frequent. After all, there's only so much you can do when your entire library is made of near-identical brown rectangles. By midday, the scribe pit becomes quieter. Lunch break. Clay is covered, hands are wiped, and someone hands you a piece of flatbread with something green and mysterious inside. It tastes like onion and regret. You eat it anyway. Eridanib leans back against the wall, sighing. I once copied the entire Epic of Gilgamesh, he says, eyes closed. Twice. One version got dropped in a flood. The other? Priest used it to prop up a wobbly altar. You nod solemnly. Some stories are too painful to relive. The afternoon is spent cataloging incoming tablets from the city granary. You help organize them by vaguely decipherable tags. Wheat totals. Spoiled barley. Unexplained hole in sack. It's oddly satisfying, like putting together a very dusty, extremely heavy puzzle. Late in the day, a new batch arrives and with it, a peculiar tablet. The inscription is unusually tidy. Elegant even. It reads like a poem. Brain forgotten, but accounted by the stars. You glance at Eridanib, who shrugs. Someone trying to sound fancy. Or maybe it was a joke. He squints at it. Could also be a prophecy. Hard to say. By now, your fingers are stiff, your knees sore, and your back feels like it's aged 10 years. But your clay copy of the animal list isn't half bad. You even manage to give the angry goose its own flair. As the sun dips and the shadows stretch across the archive floor, you catch a rare smile from Eridanib. You didn't break anything. That's something. Then, with a twinkle in his eye, tomorrow you can help with the temple receipts. They're cursed. You pause. Cursed? Oh yes. Cursed with math. And with that cheery thought, you gather your tools and head back to the apprentice quarters, the fading warmth of the clay still lingering in your hands. The next morning greets you with a chorus of frogs in the temple moat and the slow drip of condensation from a cracked ceiling tile. You shuffle through the archives corridor, arms already dusted with flecks of clay from the morning haul. You're here early, which means you've voluntold really, for tag duty. Today's lesson is a little different. Your job isn't transcription. It's tag wrangling. You're led by a rather short, hunched woman named Shag, who looks like she's personally responsible for every tag made in the last 40 years. She squints at you and mutters, "You'll be helping with the bits." The bits, as it turns out, are tag fragments. Those tiny leftover nubs of clay that break, crumble, or never got attached to anything in the first place. The cluttered shelf you're shown is full of them. Tiny, cracked tags with half a word here, a symbol there. Some are so worn the cuneiform's barely legible. Shag calls them the sticky notes of the gods. She isn't wrong. Some of them seem to serve no real purpose. One simply says again. Another reads, "Goat wrong goat." A third more ominously states, "Don't tell Eridanib." You raise an eyebrow. Should I worry about that one? Shag shrugs. If you can figure out which Eridanib, then yes. These fragments are more than just historical clutter. They're the backstage whispers of temple life. Scribbled reminders, warnings, corrections, and, according to some, petty comments between scribes. Historians still argue whether these proto-sticky notes were functional additions or just bureaucratic venting. But they show one undeniable thing. Even 5,000 years ago, humans loved leaving cryptic messages for future readers. You begin sorting. It's delicate work. Some tags are so thin they flake if you breathe on them too hard. Others have odd shapes, little squares, rectangles, a few cut into triangles. You hold up one with 3 wedges and what might be a drawing of a fish. Shag nods approvingly. That's an accounting marker. Fish rations, probably. Then she adds, or it's someone's lunch order. One of the two. You spot another tag pressed with a symbol that doesn't match anything you've seen before. It's a triangle inside a circle, flanked by small dots. You show shag. She frowns, taps her chin, and mutters, "Oh yes. That one. No one knows what it means. Maybe a family crest. Maybe just decorative." She gestures vaguely. Historians still argue. They'll keep arguing. By midday, you've developed a nose for repeated phrases. Temple entrance, to be counted, checked twice, and your personal favorite, this is your last warning. You start to suspect that ancient Sumerians were just as obsessed with bureaucracy as any modern accountant with a label maker. It's while digging through the back of the tag bin that you find something truly bizarre, a tiny cylinder of clay, no bigger than your thumb. It isn't flat like the rest, this one's rolled. Curious, you hold it up to the light. Shag eyes it with interest. "That's not a tag," she says slowly. "That's a seal." "Ah. Cylinder seals. You've heard of them but haven't seen one up close. This one's engraved with a minuscule procession, figures walking with bundles, what looks like a goat, and a small altar. It's an entire narrative squeezed onto a rollable surface. The seal would have been pressed onto wet clay to leave a scene, essentially a signature or a logo, before logos were cool. This belonged to a high priestess. Shag adds. Probably used to mark ritual tablets. Or maybe to stamp her lunch. Who can say? As you roll the seal gently over a slab of wet clay, the image emerges in fine detail. It's oddly satisfying, like stamping your approval onto history. You imagine some ancient administrator doing the same thing with practiced flair, leaving their mark on a clay tag that simply read, "Approved for goat transfer." By late afternoon, your brain is starting to hum with half-formed Sumerian words and a new appreciation for how ridiculous yet surprisingly effective this whole system was. The combination of tags and seals, tablets and twine, it's bureaucracy at its most creative. A prehistoric office space, run by gods and goats. You leave the sorting room with a light dusting of tag powder on your nose and a growing fondness for the forgotten scribbles of a civilization that really wanted you to know exactly where their ox ledger was stored. And for one sleepy moment, as you pass a wall stacked with cubbyholes, you imagine all the little tags whispering to each other. "Wrong goat. Don't rebake." Again. You're pretty sure one of them even giggles. Your back cracks in protest as you crouch down again in the dim central archive, where the walls seem to breathe clay dust and candle smoke. Today you've graduated from sorting tag fragments to visiting the deep stacks, the grand archive of baked tablets tucked behind the main temple library. It smells of warm dust, burnt incense, and that distinct, ancient aroma of bureaucracy gone slightly mad. This is where the big stuff lives. The tablets that matter. The ones someone bothered to label, fire in a kiln, and shelve neatly, sort of. If the front room is an office, this is the records basement. And the person who presides over it? A towering, thin-lipped man named Yuzulu, with a voice like dry leaves and zero tolerance for misplaced tags. He doesn't say much as he guides you between narrow corridors lined with cubbyholes. Each cubby has its own rough purpose, though not quite the genre-based system you hoped for. Instead of poetry, philosophy, or legalese sections, everything is sorted by function: temple rituals, agricultural quotas, astrological findings, funerary arrangements, city taxes, complaints, a surprisingly large section, and something ominously labeled miscellaneous. Warnings. You point to that one. "Why warnings?" you ask. Yuzula shrugs. "Some are dreams. Some are real. Some are threats. Most are complaints, but angry." Naturally, you're tasked with helping him locate a series of tax summaries from the year of the 8th crescent, whatever that means. He sends you to Shelf 5, Section B, Cubbyhole 3, a space packed with palm-sized tablets, each marked with a tidy, circular tag looped through with ancient string. You brush your fingers over them, amazed at how intact the system is. Each tag uses the same basic formula: name, place, date, content. It's the Sumerian version of title, author, file under. No color coding, but a few scribes have drawn small symbols on the tags. One has a sunburst. Another weighty line. You ask Yuzulu about them. Personal codes, he says. Each scribe had a mark. Some liked to be fancy. He pulls out a baked tag shaped slightly like a bean and points to the carved design. 3 diagonal lines and a dot. This was Lunana. Always tried to fit too much on one tag. Drove everyone mad. You nod sagely. Every archive has a Lunana. You read a tablet summary aloud from a tag. Barley collection from District Gate 3. Overseer absent. The attached tablet includes a full accounting of the collected grain, the missing overseer's name, and a short poem about how his absence was probably fated by the stars. You raise an eyebrow. Was that normal? You ask. Yuzula leans in. Yes. No. Depends on the scribe. Some were poetic. Some were petty. Historians still argue whether tablets like this were meant to be spiritual, sarcastic, or just bored. You press on, scanning through dozens of tablets, noting how some are shelved vertically, others laid flat like miniature sleeping bags. The organization isn't flawless. One tag marked Lamb Blessings is attached to what is definitely a document about irrigation canal repairs. You quietly fix the mismatch. Occasionally, you find multiple tablets bundled together with one tag, scroll style, though not scrolls at all. This was the closest thing the Sumerians had to a multi-page document. Often, they'd punch a hole through the edge and thread them with palm twine, then add a tag to summarize the set. The tag you're holding now reads, Ritual Oath Tablets for Temple Staff. Do not separate. You grin and resist the urge to tug the string just to see what happens. Yuzula glances over. Some of those bundles are cursed. You pause. Cursed how? Cursed like someone will yell at you, he says flatly. Possibly me. You nod, tie the string tighter, and move along. One tag makes you stop. It's old, older than most. Its cuneiform faint but legible. The tablet it's tied to describes a grain shipment that never arrived. But scribbled at the bottom of the tag is a secondary note in a different hand, shipment recovered by dog. All grain returned. You stare at it, then turn to Yuzulu. A dog recovered a grain shipment? He shrugs again. Could have been a person named Dog. Or a very talented actual dog. No way to know. Moments like these remind you that ancient archives weren't clinical places of sterile order. They were alive. Messy, human, strange. The systems had logic, but that logic was bound to real people with habits, moods, grudges, and sometimes, poetic tangents about barley. You start noticing stylistic differences among tags. Some scribes wrote neat and uniform, others pressed in bold, deep wedges like they were angry at the clay. One tag ends with, done in haste, while another says double-checked by moonlight. Someone cared deeply. Someone else didn't. You begin to understand that these aren't just primitive data systems. They're conversations across time. The Sumerians weren't trying to make their archives pretty. They were trying to make them work. And somehow, against the odds, they did. For generations. You carefully return a bundle to its cubby, the tag string catching slightly on your thumb. You smooth it back, pat the clay like a sleeping dog, and stand up. Yuzula nods once. You didn't mess up the bundles. You may come back. High praise from an archivist. As you step out of the deep stacks and into the brighter corridor, you feel lighter. Like you've just walked through the quiet mind of an entire civilization, one clay tag at a time. The afternoon light slants in golden rays through narrow slits in the library walls, turning the clay shelves into a warm maze of shadows and dust. You're carrying a bundle of tablets now, gingerly, like they're sleeping animals, toward a quiet corner where the cataloging scribes handle the more peculiar pieces of the archive. Today's task is unexpected. You've been assigned to examine what your supervisor calls the hymn ledger, a set of tablets and their tags that refuse to behave. You spread them out across a low clay bench. The first tablet starts promisingly enough. To the goddess Inanna, giver of storms, keeper of justice, and so on. Poetic, reverent. Definitely a hymn. But then, a few lines down, it shifts tone. Record of 9 baskets barley from Westfield, overseen by Galzu, son of Nipple. That's not standard religious fare. You blink. Did someone write a supply list in the middle of a song? You check the tag attached to the tablet. It's round, well-formed, with a decorative edge, fancier than most. The inscription reads, Offerings and Inventory, Temple West, High Feast Day. You frown. So is this a religious document? A storage log? Or both? Welcome to the great Sumerian filing conundrum. You bring the bundle to a cataloging scribe named Tula, who is hunched over her work table, scribbling on soft clay with the same intensity most people reserve for spiritual awakenings. She listens without looking up. Ah, she says. Yes. That type. The double-purpose tablet. You raise an eyebrow. That's a thing? Unfortunately. She explains, sometimes scribes combine multiple document types onto a single tablet, part prayer, part ledger, part announcement. Why? Efficiency. Laziness. Running low on clay. Possibly divine inspiration. No one knows for sure. Historians still argue whether it was deliberate or just desperate. She leans over and runs a finger across the tag. This one's especially confusing. Decorative tag, which usually means him. But the string hole is on the side, not the top. That's more typical for financial ledgers. You stare at the tablet. So what do we do? She shrugs. Depends who you ask. The temple priests say it goes in the hymnal section. The granary clerks claim it's theirs. I file it under both and pray no one asks. You chuckle, but it makes sense. In a world where everything is hand-pressed into clay and filed by human judgment, these blurred categories are inevitable. And a little wonderful. As you examine more of the so-called hybrid tablets, you notice a few patterns. They often begin with a blessing or invocation, something flowery and divine, before abruptly turning into spreadsheets written in poetic meter. One tablet starts with, The wind from the east sings your name, O Nana, and ends with, Inventory of fish rations, barrel count, 17. Another features an entire psalm praising the god Enki, with every stanza followed by a brief reminder about temple lamp oil quotas. It's like finding your grandmother's prayers scribbled in the margins of her grocery list. You begin matching the tablets to their tags, though it's tricky. Some tags are clearly trying to keep up with the multitasking. One reads, Praises and lentil counting, South Shrine. Another simply says, Festival stuff. Tula notices you grinning. They don't teach this in scribe school, she says. Too confusing. You look up. But that's what makes it interesting, right? She nods. Exactly. It's like solving a puzzle written by someone who forgot they were solving a puzzle halfway through. The deeper you go, the more weird gems you find. One tablet appears to be an elaborate poem praising King Lugalzajizi's hair. You read it twice just to be sure. It concludes with a receipt for livestock fodder signed by a priest named Illa pretends he can write, which might be an insult or just a weird coincidence. Another has a tag that reads, For future correction. The tablet itself? A full sermon on proper temple attire, followed by 3 separate measurements for brick orders and a single line reading, The goat was not supposed to be here. You're starting to see the scribes not just as bureaucrats, but as deeply human, flawed, funny, tired people who sometimes ran out of space or patience or string. You can feel their voices, their quirks, their quiet sarcasm tucked into tags and lines and scratched out symbols. And every time one of these mixed message tablets shows up, you're reminded how hard it is to compartmentalize life. Even for the ancient Sumerians, who tried. Maybe that's why the hymn ledger tablets feel so real. They blend the sacred and the mundane, the divine and the domestic. Because that's how life is. A prayer and a tax form, all rolled into one. As the lamplight flickers and the shadows grow longer, you and Tula rebind the last of the day's mystery tablets with new tags, soft, fresh clay pressed and strung through with care. One of them reads, Praise, Inventory, and maybe a goat. You smile, gently press it to the side of the tablet, and tuck it into the cubbyhole marked unclassifiable. And somehow, it fits perfectly. It's barely sunrise when you find yourself hunched over a splintery table with a steaming bowl of barley gruel and a reed stylus clutched between your fingers. Another day, another dozen tablets. But today's assignment has a slightly different flavor. It involves gossip. Official gossip. Your mentor for the day, a wiry older scribe named Azari, slides a clay tablet toward you and says only, "This one's fun." You raise an eyebrow. Fun isn't a word most people use to describe 3,000-year-old property disputes. You pick it up and begin reading. At first, it seems typical. A formal complaint written by a scribe named Enlilban about his colleague, Demuzikl. But within a few lines, the tone shifts from legal to deeply petty. And furthermore, this scribe insists his symbols are superior in clarity, when in truth they resemble the footprints of a lame bird. You glance up. Azari smirks. Classic. Apparently, you've stumbled into a long-standing feud between two temple scribes, immortalized forever in baked clay. These kinds of disputes weren't uncommon. The temple library wasn't just a place for quiet study and solemn prayer. It was a workplace, and workplaces, even sacred ones, have rivalries. When your tools are reeds and clay, your turf war plays out in stylus strokes and passive-aggressive tags. The next tablet continues the drama. Demuzikl responds in kind. Enlilban misfiles barley counts under hymns, claims his mistake is poetic innovation. I say it is laziness, baked in clay. You try not to snort. Some of these exchanges span multiple tablets. In fact, you're holding a whole bundle of them, each tied together with tags reading things like clarification, rebuttal, and strongly worded response. The string is newer, someone clearly rebundled them for study. You can practically hear the ancient equivalent of CCING the manager. What began as a disagreement over who first used a new cuneiform variant spiraled into a full-blown document trail of professional insults, temple fines, and even a brief inquiry into stylus sharpening theft. Azari explains, between sips of something suspiciously dark and bitter, that many scribes used their tablets for subtle one-upmanship. They competed to see who could write the most perfectly shaped wedges, who could finish a tax list the fastest, or who could create the most efficient tag structure. And when that failed, they got petty. You're handed another example. The tag reads, "Note for review, do not erase." You flip over the tablet and read, "The barley tally from East Storage is flawed. I suspect Enlilban counts with his elbows." You burst out laughing. Azari grins. "That one's famous. We found it in 4 different archives, all copied slightly differently." Some versions replace elbows with nose. Historians still argue whether these insults were meant purely as jokes or whether they actually held legal weight. Some scholars believe these tablets were formal grievances. Others think they were just therapeutic venting, never meant to be read outside the scribe's circle. But they were kept, filed, tagged, preserved. Which means someone, perhaps a supervisor with a sense of humor, found them worth saving. You picture a temple librarian pulling one out years later, reading the line about elbow counting, and quietly tucking it back in its cubby with a smirk. Not all scribe squabbles were written, of course. But the ones that were? Oh, they're delicious. Like one tag that says, on the matter of the duplicated flood omens, again. The attached tablet is dry, sharp, and full of veiled barbs. It ends with, "I trust this version will not be misplaced for a 3rd time, unless goats are involved once more." Azari leans back and chuckles. "You know, those two, Demuzikl and Enlilban, they ended up collaborating later. A joint prayer cycle to the goddess Nadshi. Very popular. People still quote it. Wait, after all that?" He shrugs. "Time softens even clay grudges." You think about that. About how even in the world's first bureaucracy, personalities clashed, alliances shifted, and the line between professional and personal blurred as much as a wet stylus on drying clay. And through it all, the tags kept track. One final tablet from the feud bundle catches your eye. The tag is neat, almost elegant. It reads, Resolution, joyfully acknowledged. You scan the tablet and find the closing lines. And so we agree, the symbol shall remain as drawn, for both are legible, and the temple shall be served. It's oddly moving. Two scribes, once at war over punctuation, now united in compromise. No emoji needed. You return the bundle to its storage niche with care. There's something timeless about it all. Office politics, fragile egos, passive-aggressive notes. They're not modern inventions. They're as old as writing itself. As you rise to stretch your legs, you spot a new tag resting on Azari's desk. It reads, "Apprentice needs more practice." Stylus wobbles. You glance at him. He doesn't even look up. "Tag it and file it," he says. You sigh, smile, and press your own tiny wedge of protest into a fresh lump of clay. It's a muggy morning, and the temple air smells of what reads, stale incense, and mild tension. A senior priest in pale robes strides into the archive with that look, equal parts holy purpose and bureaucratic fatigue. He carries a sealed bundle of baked tablets and a frown that could sour fresh date wine. "Inventory tablets overdue," he announces. "From last cycle. The high priest requests all returned documents be reviewed, tagged, and," he pauses, shooting a look at you, "punished if necessary." You blink. Punished? The bundle lands in your arms with a dull thud. You stagger slightly. These tablets are serious, thick, dark, their surfaces worn and slick from handling. Someone went through the trouble of baking them, which means they were considered permanent. And yet, here they are. Returned. Overdue. As the priest disappears in a swirl of authority, your instructor today, an elderly scribe named Enmi Barak, motions you over. His beard is braided, his sandals uneven, and his expression unreadable. "Let's hope no one wrote anything too embarrassing," he mutters. "They've been out nearly 3 seasons." You sit with him at a side table and begin untying the twine binding the bundle together. The tags have clearly been reattached, some freshly pressed. You can smell the recently dried clay. Each tag is a little apology. Tablet returned. Do not rebake. Filed in error. Again. Forgive lateness. Blame the ox. The first tablet concerns barley rations from 2 harvests ago. Fine enough, except that the text is clearly out of date. It references a granary supervisor who was reassigned 6 months prior. Enmi Barak sighs. "This is why we make backup tags," he says, lifting a smaller clay label that's been tucked underneath. It reads, "Corrected by order of Moon Festival Committee." You try not to laugh. Even the Sumerian version of a library had to chase down late returns. Enmi Barak explains how the temples implemented a kind of early penalty system for overdue tablets. Though there weren't any late fees exactly, just social consequences. If you kept a record too long, the high priests might have it rebaked and inscribed with a mark, a triangle with 2 dots, indicating permanent, but delayed. "You didn't want your name on one of those," Enmi Barak adds. "Too many delays, and your stylus privileges could be revoked." You shudder. No stylus? That's exile. You pick up a tag with a rather alarmed tone. Returned under protest. Still valid. Attached is a tablet describing a shipment of incense from the western provinces. The shipment, it claims, was delayed due to uncooperative wind spirits. You glance at Enmi Barak, who rolls his eyes. "That again," he mutters. "They blamed the wind spirits for everything from late taxes to spilled milk." Apparently, temple scribes could be creative when inventing excuses. One infamous tablet from centuries ago, now preserved in the back stacks, includes the claim that a record of fish rations was eaten, in part, by a heron. Historians still argue whether that was literal or metaphorical. The clay tag for that tablet? Reconstructed from memory. Probably. You begin to recatalog the return tablets, carefully matching them to newly made tags and checking them against the main ledger. A few are easy, standard tax adjustments or alter repair notes. But others are confusingly misplaced. One tag labeled astrology, favorable omens, is attached to a list of lamp oil purchases. You sigh and set it aside for refiling. One tag is so badly worn you can barely make out the text. You run your finger across it and squint. Enemy Barrag leans in. Try licking it, he suggests, without irony. You blink. Lick the tag? He nods. Moist clay reveals more detail. You give the tag a cautious, dignified lick. Sure enough, the faint wedge shapes become clearer. Boundary dispute, Westfield, pending. You proudly place it next to the correct tablet. A small win. As the stack dwindles, you come across a final tag that is, strangely, written in verse. By moon's third light and barley's way, this record shall return someday. You glance at the matching tablet. It's a ledger, yes, but also includes a small drawing, rare for Sumerian tablets, of a crescent moon and 2 stalks of barley. It almost looks like someone was trying to make it beautiful, despite it being a glorified receipt. Enemy Barrag nods approvingly. Some scribes had flair. That's a return tablet. Meant to come back after a specific cycle. Very formal. But mostly forgotten these days. You hold it a little longer than the others before gently tucking it into the correct cubby. By the end of the day, you've filed, retagged, corrected, and yes, licked a small library's worth of overdue history. The once disorderly bundle is now a neat set of baked memory, reintegrated into the dusty heartbeat of the temple library. You stretch your aching fingers and brush clay dust from your lap. Enemy Barrag watches you quietly. You did well, he says. You'd make a fine keeper of returns someday. You smile at the title. It sounds official. Important. Possibly mythical. And as you walk back to your sleeping quarters, you pass a young scribe muttering about lost tablets and misplaced bundles. And you can't help but chuckle. Somewhere, even now, a tag is missing from its mate. And somewhere else, a priest is probably blaming the wind. There's a new energy in the scribe hall today. Whispers, muffled laughter, a few knowing glances pass between apprentices. Someone found something. You pick up on it immediately, the way people hover near a certain workbench but pretend they aren't. You drift closer, curiosity winning over protocol. There, lying squarely in the center of a sanded clay desk, is a tablet unlike any you've seen. It's decorative, elaborate border markings, curlicue wedge strokes, and even a small pictograph of what appears to be a mop, or possibly a tree with attitude. Whatever it is, it doesn't scream tax summary. You lean in. The first line reads, "In the days when Gilgamesh took out the temple trash." You blink. A hush falls over the room as an older apprentice begins reading the text aloud. It unfolds like a parody. Gilgamesh, mighty hero of Uruk, demigod and dreamer, being sent by the high priestess to clean the sacred latrine, and neatly stack amphorae without breaking any more of them this time. It's not satire in the modern sense, it's stylized, respectful even, but clearly tongue-in-cheek. The epic hero is portrayed with exaggerated humility, performing chores while grumbling in poetic verse. "Lo, I bend as the broom does bend, though my glory prefers no sweeping." You stifle a laugh. So do 3 nearby scribes. This isn't an official record. It's not a hymn, a contract, or even a letter. It's what could only be described as Sumerian fanfiction. Your instructor, Ninmala, chuckles and joins you. These pop up now and then, usually copied by bored apprentices. A little creative writing mixed with mandatory praise. She flips the tablet over and points to the edge. There, faint but clear, is a tiny tag baked into the corner, exercise. Temple School. Not for archive. And yet here it is, archived. Someone liked it enough to keep it, Ninmala says. Or maybe they just forgot to toss it. Either way, we're grateful. She gestures to the corner shelves, where a few similar tablets live. You help her retrieve them. Most are small, lightweight, and loosely organized under tags like training texts or rhetorical devices. Try again. But now that you're looking, the trend becomes clear. One tablet dramatizes the procurement of incense as a daring quest, full of dramatic sighs and a near-death encounter with a particularly rude merchant. Another imagines a conversation between the goddess Ninhursag and a lost sheep that speaks in riddles. You can practically see the apprentices hunched over their clay, stifling giggles while pretending to copy grain records. Some of these pieces include exaggerated metaphors, bizarre characters, and anachronistic flourishes, like one tablet that refers to a chariot made of wind and song. Was it a metaphor? A joke? A dream sequence? Historians still argue. You read another tag aloud, when Inanna argued with the fence post. It's real. The attached clay is a dialogue between the goddess of love and a stubborn wooden barrier, which insists it has no romantic feelings and prefers solitude. It ends with Inanna blessing it anyway. Why were these kept? You ask. Ninmala shrugs. Practice, mostly. But some scribes had a flair for story. And sometimes, rarely, these little pieces were read aloud at festivals, as comic relief. So yes, even in the formal, pious temple libraries of ancient Sumer, there was space for absurdity. Some tablets are clearly meant to teach. You find one with repetitive phrasing, a sort of drill for structure. Another features a very short, very strange parable. A turtle loses its name and must retrieve it by speaking only in verbs. You can't tell if it's spiritual, grammatical, or just deeply weird. Still, the scribes took care with these. Many are neatly formed, well preserved, and, most importantly, tagged. Sometimes with serious intention, scribe practice 3, metrics, and sometimes with dry humor, don't read aloud with food in mouth. You come across one final tablet that makes you pause. The tag is unusually formal. Record of apprentices, moon cycle 18. Sounds boring enough. But the tablet is a list of names, each followed by a single word descriptor. Tula, neat. Lugal, slow. In Lilban, drama. Ishmi, goat. You squint. Wait. Goat? Ninmala leans in. Ishmi always smelled like goats. Right. You run your finger across the tag again, noticing that it's baked into the corner of the tablet, not tied with string. Permanent, Ninmala notes. They meant to keep it. Probably for laughs. Or blackmail. The line between record-keeping and inside joke blurs once more. As the sun dips and the shadow of the ziggurat falls across the temple courtyard, you shelve the tablets carefully back into their cubbies. You tag a few more training texts and gently copy over one of the funnier passages from the Gilgamesh Chor's epic for your own practice. Because somewhere in this dusty clay archive, amid the grain tallies and flood warnings and formal hymns, there lived a vibrant, playful spirit. A little mischief baked into mud. A reminder that even in the world's oldest libraries, humor had its rightful place, between the tax logs and the divine. You begin the day with a hopeful sense of order. Your workspace is clean. Your stylus has been reshaped to a fine point. The clay is fresh, cool, and promising. Then you walk into room 9. It's chaos. Not loud chaos. No one shouting. But the silence is its own kind of loud, broken only by the muttering of scribes elbow-deep in fragments. Fragments of tablets. Fragments of tags. Fragments of sanity. You're greeted by Scylla, a small, fast-moving woman whose robes are stained with dried slipped clay and what you hope is fruit paste. We need help, she says before you can ask. This is the overflow room. The room of the unorganizable. You blink. That's an official name? No. But it should be. You step inside and immediately see the problem. Here lie dozens, possibly hundreds, of broken tablets, unlabeled, mismatched, sometimes in multiple pieces. Some are cracked clean in half. Others are just corner shards with half a word. One wedge here, a strained numeral there. It's less of a library, more of a clay jigsaw puzzle. This is where the questionable stuff ends up. Scylla explains. Things that defy categories. Things we dropped. Things we don't understand. You pick up a jagged piece. It reads, and thus, on the 4th day, he brought, and that's it. You flip it over. Nothing. The tag nearby simply says, not goat-related. Helpful. Today's job? try to piece together what belongs to what. It's like assembling the lost history of the Sumerians with half the instructions written in code, the other half smudged by time and someone's elbow. You start gently sorting, pile by script style, line thickness, even clay color. Some tablets are a darker hue, meaning they were baked longer. Others are still slightly porous. The older pieces have smaller, neater cuneiform. Some even have decorative borders. Scylla shows you a trick. Hold the edge of one piece up to another and see if the wedge strokes align. If they do, you might have found a match. It's delicate, painstaking work, less like being a librarian, more like being a potter's archaeologist. You make your first match within an hour. Two curved pieces snap together neatly with the most satisfying little click. The phrase now reads, "He brought the 3 jugs of date wine to you." Pause. Scylla leans in. To whom? You hold up the remaining fragment, a small, ragged triangle that was nearly thrown away. It reads, "The Goat Pavilion." You both exhale. Of course it's goats again. You retag the tablet, date wine delivery, Goat Pavilion, fragmentary. You wrap it in a fresh loop of palm string and slide it into a waiting slot labeled partial, food logistics. From there, it becomes a kind of rhythm. You match fragments by hand feel. Some pieces fit awkwardly but reveal complete thoughts. Others form strange sequences, a warning about water shortages followed by a love poem, then a list of brick measurements. Could this be one tablet? You ask. Scylla shrugs. Maybe. Or maybe someone stacked them and they fused together in a flood. Ah yes, the ever-looming threat of flood. Apparently, before kiln firing was common, many tablets were sun-dried and vulnerable to weather. And when the Euphrates swelled, archives like this one turned into a slip and slide of Sumerian literature. One batch of shards carries a slick, shiny feel, water damage. The tag is gone, but the remaining words speak of offerings washed away, and a list of things left uncounted. You and Scylla agree to shelve it under flood-affected, possible ritual. You also stumble upon several strange tablets that seem to start mid-thought. One begins, "And thus we do not speak of the 7th jar." Another reads, "Enough figs. No more figs, I am serious." No context. No tags. Just fragments of bureaucratic exasperation. There's one slab, larger, unusually thick, that bears a strange mix of markings. It begins like a standard ledger, then shifts into almost poetic verse. 5 bricks wide, and 3 bricks tall, the wall shall hold, unless it falls. You raise an eyebrow. Building instructions? Scylla laughs. Or a prophecy? Could be either. Historians still debate whether tablets like this were purely practical, or if they carried ritual significance. Some argue that poetic phrasing was a mnemonic aid for builders. Others think it was just what happens when scribes got bored of repeating brick size, regular for the 100th time. You tag the piece, structural? Rhyming? Unclear. It joins the section labeled Poetic Logistics, which you're pretty sure someone made up last week. Toward the end of the day, you find a bundle of untagged shards that seem unusually soft. Scylla frowns. Recent additions. Someone tried to reconstruct a broken archive from another site. It arrived in a basket, without tags. Naturally, you press a shard into fresh clay and see if the imprint matches one of the others. It does. Barely. The resulting phrase reads, "This tablet is a copy. The original was better." You pause. Is this sarcasm? Scylla tilts her head. It might be. Or a scribe reviewing his own work. Or a warning. Or a joke. She grins. You're learning. The lines are blurry. As dusk falls, the unorganizable room is only marginally more organized, but your hands are stained with purpose. You reshelve the matched fragments, tag them gently, and place a note for the next apprentice. Probable barley shipment. Possible prophecy. One piece smells faintly of onions. You walk out with clay dust in your hair and a distinct feeling that history is less a neat timeline, more a broken pot reassembled by blindfolded interns. And yet, somehow, It all holds together. It's the fourth day of what you've begun calling the clay cycle, and your fingers now instinctively twitch whenever someone hands you a tablet. But today's assignment isn't about ledgers or feuds or unfiled barley complaints. Today, you're headed to the shrine room. Not for worship, though you do pass the scent of myrrh and hear the echo of soft chanting, but for something far more niche, a ritual in search of a missing tablet. You're greeted by Termutu, the temple's archivist priest, whose duties include both filing divine texts and praying for misfiled ones to return. He looks deeply serious, which is impressive for someone holding a bundle of burning juniper twigs and muttering about textual recovery blessings. You follow him into a small side chamber lit by oil lamps and painted with fading murals of scribes and celestial bodies. In the center sits a modest altar, clay, naturally, surrounded by tags. Hundreds of tags. Some strung together like necklaces. Others pinned upright in soft clay bases. A few sit in baskets, tagged with things like lost, possibly burned, stolen by rival temple, and definitely not in cubby 14. We checked. Termutu gestures for you to sit. We begin with the invocation of Ninima. He intones, goddess of writing, keeper of the eternal list. He lights a small flame and begins chanting a soft, rhythmic prayer that sounds suspiciously like a librarian's last-ditch effort to find a missing checkout slip. The ritual, you realize, is less about actual magic and more about intention. Focus. Recalling the memory of the tablet to aid in its recovery. A meditative form of archival forensics. You're handed a tag marked with a single word, feast. It's linked to a tablet detailing offerings made during a solstice festival 3 cycles ago. The tablet has vanished, possibly misfiled, possibly broken, possibly stolen. The tag is all that remains. Termutu explains that tablets, unlike gods, are not omnipresent. They're lost, fragile, mortal. But the tag, if treated with reverence, can act as a beacon. We name it, we remember it, we honor the clay, he says. Then we check the whole archive. Again. You nod solemnly. It's ceremonial, yes, but there's logic beneath it. As part of the rite, you're tasked with copying the original tag's inscription onto a fresh piece of clay, carefully, mindfully, with no smudging. This creates a kind of backup memory, a clay echo. You press your stylus slowly, intentionally, Feast of Spring Barley, Moon Year 2, Third Gate Offering. After it's done, the copy is placed in a shallow bowl filled with powdered ash and left near the altar. Termutu will consult with it again tomorrow. It's a mix of reverence, tradition, and bureaucratic hope. You look around and notice that many tags here are oddly shaped, rounded corners, decorative rims, even a few with holes that suggest they were worn like pendants. Some scribes wore them, Termutu says, to remind themselves what they were searching for. It hits you then. The tag isn't just a tool. It's a memory aid, a signpost, sometimes even a prayer. You're handed another one. This one reads, Hymn to Nana, copied in haste, incomplete. There's a faint thumbprint on the back. You wonder whose it was. The missing tablet, no longer in the hymn section, not found among the drafts, is presumed lost. Maybe damaged. Maybe left out in a storm. Maybe someone just forgot to tag it. The ritual continues. You join a quiet procession as scribes walk in circles around the archive room, each carrying a tag and softly repeating its inscription, as if speaking it aloud might draw the lost text back from wherever it wandered. You almost laugh, gently, reverently, because it's strangely beautiful. This blend of faith and filing. It's ridiculous, of course, but also deeply human. A desperate, gentle attempt to hold on to memory. You ask Termutu whether any tablets have actually been found this way. He nods. Oh yes. Not many. But when one turns up, weeks, months later, it always feels like a small miracle. He recounts one, a tablet thought lost in the great reordering of shelves, later discovered propping up a tilted table in the astronomy corner. The tag had been quietly weeping at the altar for weeks. Another story, a long missing receipt for temple brick rations found inside a reed basket, behind a stack of flood omens. Its tag had already been buried in the Morn tablets section. And then there are tablets never recovered. But still, their tags remain here. Teramutu calls them the quiet ghosts of the archive. Some tags are generations old. No one remembers the content of the tablets they once described, but the tags are preserved anyway. You kneel before a collection labeled the Silent Ledger Set, and press your hand to the nearest one. It's warm from the room's soft light and feels heavier than its size suggests. You realize something in that moment. A tag can outlive its tablet. It is memory. Even when the clay beneath it vanishes. The ritual closes with a final chant and the extinguishing of the flame. Each apprentice lays their tag down in a row, clay side up, inscriptions facing the gods. Or, at least, toward the hope of rediscovery. As you walk back through the Hall of Cubbies, past records of goat disputes and lamp oil requests and epic poetry gone wrong, you feel strangely grounded. Not everything will be found. Not every tablet survives. But someone, somewhere, made a tag for it. And that matters. Rain. Or something close to it. More of a lazy drizzle slinking down from the heavens, soaking the temple roofs and turning the courtyard's neatly packed dirt into a series of slow, squishy hazards. You step carefully across the slick flagstones toward the archive entrance, the hem of your tunic already damp and heavy. Today, you learn the first rule of a clay-based knowledge system: water is not your friend. Inside the library, a small crowd has formed. Not out of panic, but concern. A roof tile slipped last night, and now a thin but persistent leak is tapping directly onto a corner shelf of unbaked tablets. You hear it before you see it, the rhythmic plip-plop of ancient records slowly dissolving into a kind of bureaucratic oatmeal. A scribe named Calbun is already there, crouched with a straw mat and a worried look. You join him as he peels up a sagging tag, its wedged marks already softening into obscurity. "This one was a weather omen," he mutters. "Now it's ironic." You help him move what's salvageable. Most are sun-dried tablets, meant to be temporary, and they're crumbling fast. The unbaked clay is slick, the inscriptions warping into illegibility. The tags, too, are at risk, especially those that weren't attached but simply nestled beside their tablets like dutiful siblings. "This happens more than we admit," Calbun says. "Flooding, storms, goats. Clay doesn't last forever. But something does." He points to a small, water-streaked cubby, where a handful of baked tablets sit dry and unharmed. Their tags are intact, pressed with sharp, deliberate symbols, baked hard like pottery. You reach in and pick up one. It reads Flood Log. North Gate. Never again. A grim chuckle escapes your throat. Calbun tells you stories as you work, of other floods, worse ones. Once, a whole wing of the archive was lost when the river overflowed and turned the tablet room into a mud bath. The survivors were pulled from the sludge days later, their tags either gone or fused to the wrong texts. In one case, a shipment of omens about rain was found scattered across the courtyard, ironically soaked and unreadable. The tag, however, had washed up beside a drain, rain dreams. Mild peril. He shrugs. "You get used to it. We preserve what we can." The rest becomes part of the archive's silence. Some scribes tried to protect their work preemptively. One tablet you find is wrapped in an old linen sleeve, now ruined, but the clay within is dry. The tag is baked into a small pendant and tied with fiber string, still miraculously intact. It reads, "In case of flood, read carefully. Then run." There's a certain gallows humor among the temple archivists. When your library is one heavy rainstorm away from oblivion, you either laugh or cry into your clay bucket. You help triage the damp section, separating what can be dried, what might be salvaged, and what is, sadly, soup. Calbun marks each grouping with new tags, set to dry partial recovery, possible date record lost to the elements. Remembered anyway. It's strange, watching memory melt. A name here, a law there. Whole arguments vanish mid-sentence, forever unresolved. Historians still argue about how much we've truly lost. Entire myths, legal precedents, medical treatments, all probably erased by one over-enthusiastic rain cloud. But the tags hold on longer than expected. You pick up one damp, curled clay label and read the faint inscription, offerings, broken vessel, amended. No tablet in sight. But someone, somewhere, once thought this was worth documenting. And in a way, they succeeded. The tablet's gone. But the thought remains. The afternoon is spent reshelving what was saved and drying what might survive. Clay slates are stacked near warm braziers. Styluses are passed around to reinscribe softening lines. The room smells like wet earth and perseverance. One apprentice sighs as he writes over a melting barley inventory. Should have baked it. Another mutters. Should have written it on stone. Calbun chimes in dryly. Should have been born in Egypt. You all laugh quietly. You tag one last salvaged piece, reinscribed from memory. Maybe accurate. Maybe not. Then place it beside its ghost of a predecessor, a tablet now nothing more than a muddy blot. Before leaving, you pass the entryway shrine to the goddess Nisaba, patron of scribes. Someone has left a lump of clay at her feet. No writing. Just a raw, ready slab. A blank slate. You kneel beside it, and gently press a stylus into the surface, carving a single wedge, the Sumerian sign for preserve. It might not last. The wind might carry it away. But for now, it says enough. The morning breeze is sharp today, dry, cool, carrying with it the smell of clay dust and something vaguely spicy, maybe cumin from the temple kitchens. You're halfway through rearranging a cart of tribute records when a scribe you've never seen before appears beside you, robes spotless, sandals polished, holding a tablet like it's made of gold. Are you the one who retagged the Goat Pavilion ledgers? You nod, wary. Good. Come with me. You're led to a smaller archive chamber, more discreet than most, tucked between the shrine corridor and what you suspect might be someone's secret nap room. The walls here are lined with polished cubbies. Security cubbies. Not for sacred texts or disaster plans, but for sensitive materials. What kind of sensitive materials? Intellectual property, the scribe says flatly. You blink. You mean, like stolen tablets? He nods. Apparently, theft wasn't uncommon in the golden days of Sumerian bureaucracy. Not theft for profit, mind you. These weren't being hawked at the market for a few bronze shekels. This was intellectual theft. One temple scribe copying another's work and claiming it as their own. Rival cities smuggling administrative methods. Even priestly spies making off with omens that hadn't yet been shared publicly. The archive you're now standing in holds the evidence. You're handed a set of clay bundles, each tablet wrapped in soft linen and tagged in bright red ink. One reads, recovered from Nippur. No markings. Another, suspected forgery. Style inconsistent with known archives. A third, ominously, matches tablet lost during temple fire, but earlier date. These aren't accusations. They're mysteries. You begin your task by comparing a recovered tablet from a rival city to a known UR template. Both bear the same list of ritual offerings, down to the number of figs and phrasing of, to the goddess who sees through clouds. But there are tiny differences. Line spacing, stylus angle, even the grammar. One includes a side note, may require more salt next year. The other does not. Forgery? Or just parallel record keeping? Historians still argue. You pick up a tag marked possible theft, Larsa incident. The tablet it's tied to is elaborate, detailing a system of rotating canal maintenance shifts across multiple temple districts. Ingenious, efficient, and oddly familiar. You've seen the same structure referenced in UR tablets, but years after this one's estimated creation. Tensions between cities were real. Competition for water, for labor, for prestige. If a system worked in one temple, others wanted it. And if they couldn't create it, they copied it. Sometimes secretly. One recovered tablet includes a hidden seal, pressed faintly into the corner, barely visible. It's not the mark of the original scribe. It belongs to someone from a different temple entirely. You hold it carefully, turning it in your hands. Why keep these? You ask. The archivist shrugs. to study patterns, to compare styles, to remember that scribes, too, had ambitions. You spend the rest of the day comparing disputed texts, spotting matching turns of phrase, signature stylistic flourishes, reused metaphors and hymns. One poem praising Inanna is nearly identical to another found far to the east, except one version rhymes more. You note the difference in the tag, poetic variation, possible flattery plagiarism. You begin to sense just how complex this world really was. The Sumerian scribes weren't just copyists. They were creators, innovators, rivals. Sometimes, they filed official complaints. A tag reads, "On the unauthorized reuse of my flood calculations." The attached tablet is a stern missive accusing a neighboring priest of unwarranted inspiration. You come across another. Do not trust the scribe from Eridu. He double counts goats. No tablet. Just the tag. By late afternoon, you find the most curious item of all. A fully intact tablet sealed in a private clay envelope, meant to be opened only by someone authorized. The tag, confidential agreement. Duplicate forbidden. The seal is unbroken. You glance at the archivist. He nods once. With careful fingers, you chip the envelope open. Inside is a record of grain trades between two temples, outlining secret surplus exchanges, outside the official city quotas. It's nothing scandalous by modern standards. But for the time, it was practically political espionage. You reseal the envelope in fresh clay and press a small tag, reviewed. Intact. History still watching. You leave the chamber in silence, mind buzzing. Not just from what you read, but from what it all means. Tablets can lie. Tags can mislead. But together, they form a dialogue, not just of facts, but of intentions, strategies, personalities, theft, rivalry, quiet revenge. Clay remembers more than just what it's told. The sky is overcast as you cross the temple courtyard. Clouds stretched wide like old linen, diffusing the sun's sharpness into a sleepy, silver haze. Your footsteps echo gently off the baked flagstones. Today marks the end of your training rotation, and your final assignment carries a ceremonial gravity, a solo reshelving task. But not just any reshelving. You're holding a bundle of tablets, well-worn, slightly chipped, and clearly loved. The attached tag reads, "Closing ledger, third scribe cycle, to be filed by hand." There's an asterisk beside the inscription, and a faint extra line underneath. Let the apprentice learn by filing the past. Your instructor, Ninmala, offered no further explanation. Just a nod and a half-smile that said, "You'll understand." You step into the deep stacks. The quiet is different here, less like silence, and more like a hush that waited thousands of years to arrive. The clay shelves curve inward slightly with age, and each cubby feels like a breath held in time. You unpack the bundle carefully. The first tablet is a simple record, names of scribes, dates of assignments, and a note about how many styluses were returned versus mysteriously missing. The tone is formal but warm, as if written not just for record, but for posterity. The second tablet is stranger. It's a reflection. Written by a senior scribe decades ago, it muses on the strange life of an archivist. We record what the gods do not bother to remember. We count the things men would rather forget. You pause, stylus poised midair, unsure whether to tag it as philosophy, memoir, or sleepless rambling. You settle on, closing reflection. Placement unclear. The third tablet is unfinished. It begins with a quote, asterisk. "The flood takes what the fire misses," asterisk, and trails off into a single wedge mark, midline. You don't know why, but your chest tightens a little. It's hard to explain what this archive has become to you. It began as mud, endless, repetitive, bureaucratic clay. You scoffed at goat tallies, groaned over stylus technique, got lost in the weeds of barley tax ledgers. But now, you see it differently. Each tag is a voice. Each tablet a moment. Even the dullest receipt carries a kind of dignity. Someone took the time to press each wedge, to record what needed recording, even when no one asked them to. And someone else, maybe you, maybe someone after you, will find that record again, and know they lived. You tag the last tablet with care. The inscription is half poetic, half mundane. By moon's rise we filed our final figures. The gods asked for none of them. You slide the bundle into its resting place. Cubbyhole 11D, Temple Business Archive, bottom row. You smooth the tag loop and press it gently against the clay, as if to reassure it, you made it back. And then you pause. You draw your own small tag, not official, not for anyone but you. It reads, Apprentice Cycle Completed. No broken tablets. One misfiled goat. You smile. Tie it to a tiny corner peg at the side of the shelf, and walk away without looking back. As you step into the corridor, you realize you've become a part of the system, not just a visitor to history, but another dusty voice pressed into the long, winding ledger of it. And in the stillness, among the tens of thousands of silent tablets, something very old seems to sigh, satisfied. The corridors are dim now, lit only by the gentle flicker of oil lamps. You find yourself walking slower than usual, your breath softening, your steps sinking into a rhythm of clay and quiet. Outside, the evening wind stirs the papyrus leaves, their rustling almost like whispered cuneiform. Tiny marks in the air, vanishing as soon as they're made. You pass the empty scribe benches, the used styluses resting neatly beside bowls of drying slip. The last of the incense has faded, but you can still smell its warmth in the air, earthy, comforting. You settle onto a low mat by the window, eyes closing, the weight of the day melting from your shoulders. You've touched tablets once read by kings, once scrawled by sleepy apprentices. You've filed lists that once decided how much fish a priest could eat, and hymns that begged gods to stop the rain. And through it all, you've seen the humanity behind the history, not in grand declarations, but in the quiet, persistent effort to preserve something. Even now, somewhere, a tablet has gone missing, and a tag is waiting to bring it home. So breathe slowly. Feel the weight of time press gently against you, not heavy, not urgent. Just steady. Like the palm of a friend resting lightly on your shoulder. Tomorrow will come, but tonight the tablets sleep. And so should you.